All right, what we're going to do now is take a deep dive look at the security risk assessment tool that I've been referencing throughout this presentation. This tool is designed for small to medium-sized practices and facilities and their business associates. Historically, that definition refers to anywhere from 1 to 10 healthcare providers. And as I mentioned earlier, this SRA tool is a software application. Now, this tool was not built to be simultaneously used by many users. A single user at any one time with appropriate permissions to install and run the application on the computer will use the tool to individually capture information. Multiple users can access the tools. It's just got to be on separate occasions. And then also, you cannot merge two different copies of the data. So let's look now at creating users. To create a new user, all you do is enter first name, last name, and initials. You can see I've already got myself entered here. And in our previous example earlier on, I had myself entered twice. You can actually double click, go in, and delete somebody if you need to. The next step you want to do after you enter yourself as a user is go to this tab, About Your Practice, and enter information about your facility, your demographics. This information is going to be saved within the tool and will not be collected and maintained by HHS. Very good way if you have multiple facilities. The next thing you're going to do is add your business associates. So you'll be using this tab here that features fields for name, type, and address. You're going to do this because this is one of the requirements that you have. You have to have a list of all your current business associates. There's no limit on the number of business associates that you can add. New fields are going to be generated after you reselect the business associate header. And then what you're going to do is go to your asset inventory. Again, another requirement under the standards. So you've got several fields here: name, type, has EPHI, and assignee. Under the name, the information that they're looking for here is, I guess, think of it as what type of asset is this? Electronic health record, practice management system, those would be some examples. Under type, there's where you're going to describe what type of asset it is. For example, it might be an application. The next field, describe the EPHI. It's here that you're going to want to document if the asset receives, transmits, or stores EPHI. And then the last field, assignee. This allows you to document who in the organization is responsible for this particular asset. So let's go back now and log in to the original risk assessment tool. You'll notice over here on the right hand side you've got three options once you log in. Import assessment. Data can be exported from the SRA tool into an SRA file. The SRA file can be stored as an offline backup or transferred to another computer. The SRA file can be imported to another copy of the SRA tool. This option allows you to import a previously exported SRA file. Importing and exporting these files, it's useful, for example, when you're transferring risk assessments between computers, because remember, as I told you earlier in the presentation, once you start it on your computer, that's where it's going to land. So it's very computer specific unless you use this Import Assessment tab. And here's your option to create a new file. This allows you to create a brand new assessment, which is probably where you're going to be since you're just starting, and then continue the current. If you've previously imported an assessment or you have already started an assessment, like in my case, this option allows you to continue working on that specific assessment. So let's go to my particular risk assessment tool that I've already started here. As you can see here, this yellow bar up here at the top. You're gonna see that for each assessment question, and it's labeled according to the type of security category that the question covers. So for example, A stands for administrative, T for technical, and PH for physical. Questions are not presented in numerical order, just so you know. They're pretty much in categories. And just on top of this yellow bar, see that blue progress bar? That indicates how much of your assessment you've completed. You can see my example here. I'm not finished. I'm probably about 2/3 of the way done. And then let's jump back here to this first question. Again, this is an administrative question, and it follows standard 164.308 A11, a standard, just in case you feel the urge to look this one up. So it asks the question, does your practice develop, document, and implement policies and procedures for assessing and managing risk to its EPHI? I went ahead and answered this as a yes, and I listed my current activities to prove why I feel it's a yes. This has been in place now consistently for the last 5 years. Remember, they're wanting you to explain yourself, to give an example, so it's very thorough. Once you've completed that part, you'll come down just below that white box. You have to score this. You have to give it a low, medium, or high ranking as to what you think. Again, these are all your opinions as to what the threat or the likelihood of this happening at your facility. Because we do this on an ongoing basis, we've got it hardwired, we've been doing it for 5 years, I feel like the threat is very low. The impact, because I've got a low threat, we've mastered this, again, I feel like this is very low. They do give you over here on the right-hand side some tabs to also utilize when you're trying to determine your answers to the questions. So things to consider. A portable electronic device is any electronic apparatus or singular or multiple capabilities of recording, storing, or transmitting data, etc. So it gives you some definitions, helps you to understand what the question means. Threats and vulnerabilities. Again, you can read through this, but it just is trying to help you answer these questions over here where you try to decide if the likelihood was low and if the impact was low. And then over here, this final tab gives you some ideas on examples of safeguards. And in this regard, it's really developing your risk assessment. So those are just, again, some tools to help you. Let's look at another question. This also is an administrative question. It's a standard. Does your practice have a process for periodically reviewing its risk analysis policies and procedures and making updates as necessary? In this question, I flagged it because I feel like we've got some definite issues here, and I put no. So when you answer no to any question, it's going to ask you, is the answer no because of cost, because of practice size, because of complexity, or do you have an alternate solution? Let's go ahead and mark complexity for this one. My recent activities is that we last reviewed our policies November 15th of 2016 by the governing body. Some notes that I'm making that we're going to need to review again after we do the risk assessment. We're going to check these policies and make sure that we're including all of our currently used technology. And then my action plan is to schedule a completed review by February 15th of 2017. And make sure we talk about this at our quarterly board meeting so this can be ongoing. I feel like my likelihood of a threat is medium on this one, and if I'm correct and we do have a threat, the impact as well would be a medium. So that just kind of shows you how those tools are utilized. Let's look at one more question here. Again, this is administrative. Does your practice periodically complete an accurate and thorough risk analysis such as upon occurrence of a significant event or change in your business, organization, or environment. I flagged this as a no. Let's do this, or let's change that over to a yes and see how that looks. Yeah, because we do feel like we're doing this. We did a risk assessment completed when we thought we had a breach, and so we're going to label this as a low for both likelihood as well as impact. So let's look at some of the other tools now that you understand how to use the questions. As I mentioned in my scenario here, I'm about 2/3 of the way done. If you go down here to the navigator, that will give you an idea of where you're at, where you stand. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's good to break this up amongst your team. You may take certain questions and have someone else take their questions. Let's just pretend that I'm doing managing the integrity of my electronic PHI. I failed to answer one of the questions under the technical component, and that was likely because I was looking for some additional information. Here I can see that it was T39 that I failed to answer. So if I click on that, it'll take me right there. Do your practice implement safeguards to assure that ePHI is not accessed while en route to its intended recipient? Probably needed a little bit more information on that. So now I can go back and answer that question. Once you get finished with all your questions, you're going to want to look at your report. And as you can see here, this is going to be a nice grid for you to quickly scroll down and see which things are medium risk versus which things are at a high risk, because you're going to want to obviously attend to your high risk issues more quickly. It will also tell you where the question was, and if you look over here, you can look at your notes. Here I'm going to talk to Dr. Smith about his cell phone and find out if he uses a thumb drive. So it's a great way. You can also export this to a Excel spreadsheet, which I think you're going to find very helpful. You'll notice that I actually gave you a copy of my Excel spreadsheet that I exported as one of your handouts. Again, I think it's a great tool to just scroll down so you can easily visualize where you're at. Also gives you a wonderful chart review. You can see here that based on this summary, I have 1 high risk issue, I have 4 medium, and I have 94 that are low risk. My high risk is under the administrative category. So I think this is great. It's a good tool to help you understand where your risks lie. We'll toggle back to the beginning where we started out, and you'll be able to just pick up where you left off, easily toggling between the next questions. Again, these are grouped in categories, and if you're using a team effort, which I highly recommend, you'll be able to, now these categories do not necessarily marry up with the ones where I broke up your policies for you earlier in the presentation. I did them more by roles. You can use either function, but as you go through here, they're going to be asking you if you have processes and you have policies. In order to, it takes a long time to put this risk assessment together. One of the things that I would recommend is you take the handouts that I gave you on policies and on processes, glance through those first and kind of do your checklist. I think it will make it more efficient for you to do your actual risk assessment, especially if you've not done this before and you feel like you're missing a lot of policies and processes. You might want to go through and get those in place first and then do your tool so you're not going so back and forth. But it's up to you. You can do it either way. It'll just be a longer process for you. And then there you have the security risk assessment tool that was given to us by HHS.